Now, the Prime Minister held talks with the British Foreign Secretary and Defence Secretary today in a bid to strengthen diplomatic relations between the nations. Joining me to discuss this and more is Professor of International Security and Intelligence Studies at the ANU, John Blaxland. John, what was the aim of today's meeting?
Rita, look, it's the first one they've had since the AUKUS agreement, and it has been significant in terms of making sure that the bilateral ties between Australia and the United Kingdom are progressing bilateral issues and not just trilateral ones. Of course, this is very much linked in with Britain's post-Brexit engagement in the Indo-Pacific, and Australia is a very important part of that equation. So to have Elizabeth Truss and Ben Wallace come to Australia when so much is going on in London and in Europe at the moment speaks to the significance that the Brits are placing on the bilateral ties and the significance of Auckland. And what we've seen emerge from this space is very interesting. Australian cyber and critical technology partnership with the United Kingdom. Interestingly, of course, Australia and the United Kingdom have close cyber ties springing from their close signals intelligence ties from GCHQ and Australian Signals Directorate and their cyber security centres that have been spawned from these agencies that are delivering world-class cyber security protection and technology innovation. One of the interesting things about this is they're stressing the need to engage in the Indo-Pacific. And to my mind, that is a really positive spin on the utility of the Five Eyes partnership and the bilateral UK-Australia part of that. So that's a very positive thing. There are some other aspects as well. Not likely to see any UK nuclear propulsion submarines based in Australia anytime soon. Simply, they don't have enough of them operationally, and they're too busy dealing with the challenges they've got up in the North Sea and the Baltic and the North Atlantic, to be honest.
Well, yeah, they've got a few domestic dramas as well at the moment, keeping them busy. Now, the White House has been warning that Russia and Ukraine are on the brink of war and that no option is off the table to respond to potential aggression from Russia. US Secretary of State Anthony Blinken and Russia's foreign minister are set to meet Friday in Geneva after talks last week failed to ease concerns. John, is Putin capitalising while the White House is distracted with multiple crises at home? Is the Biden presidency a factor at all in what's happening between Russia and the Ukraine?
Look, it's not just, yes, I think you're right, Rita, but it's not just the Biden presidency. We've got also the fact that there's a new head of state in Germany. We've got Boris Johnson in the UK suffering, political turmoil. The situation in Kazakhstan, we've got situation in Iran, and of course the challenges at the other end of the Eurasian landmass with Joe Biden trying to pivot the United States towards the Indo-Pacific and trying to get the focus more onto engagement with China and managing security issues there. So Putin knows that this is very trying for the Biden administration. They've also got their own domestic political troubles. The Biden can't get things through Congress, and the nation is divided politically like we haven't seen before. Talk of civil war is seriously contemplated by some pundits. We're seeing remarkable uncertainty at the moment that Putin is happy to exploit, because what he really wants, it would appear, is to get a guarantee that Ukraine is not going to be part of NATO. This is something the Ukraine government has been talking about. And even, look, to be honest, 19 years ago, in 2003, Putin himself is reported to have said, look, he understands that Ukraine might want to be part of NATO, and at that stage didn't express objections. But of course, a lot of water under the bridge since then. 19 years of slowly degrading bilateral relationship between the United States and Russia has made things a lot trickier. Putin a lot more combative, and Russia a lot more prepared to be confrontational.
It's going to be fascinating to see what happens there and how the rest of the world responds. Now, we're seeing the UN and many countries express willingness to assist Tonga as it recovers from the recent tsunamis. Among those who have expressed the desire to help is China, with the Chinese Foreign Ministry stating it is very concerned about the volcanic eruptions of Tonga. John, I'm wondering, I don't know if I'm being too cynical, but what are the chances China's trying to capitalise on this disaster and trying to just increase its influence in that region?
Oh, that's completely inconceivable, Rita. I say with my tongue firmly planted in my cheek. We've seen this in the Solomon Islands. We've seen this in the past. China is looking to use a bit of checkbook diplomacy, has talked about, it's thrown $100,000 in promises to the response to the Tonga crisis. It's talked about deploying aid. So there'll be a question about runway control in Tonga as well, because Australia and New Zealand are obviously taking the lead roles in providing humanitarian assistance there. New Zealand and Australian Air Forces already actively involved there. The Royal New Zealand Navy and the Australian Navy on their way. New Zealand's probably going to get there first because it'll be closer. But essentially, a lot coming from Australia and New Zealand. And we are seeing, as I've argued in a paper called a geostrategic SWOT analysis for Australia I wrote recently, not just in looming environmental challenges like this one we've just seen with the tsunami wave and the explosion and pandemics thrown in on top of that. The mix is, who would have thunk it, a year ago, even less, that you'd get this combination and then great power competition thrown in on top of that. It's getting challenging. And of course, a lot of cynics would say, Australia's been more front-footed about this just because of China. Look, I think that's a little bit simplistic. There's a compelling reason for Australia and New Zealand to play a prominent role in this space. It's something we've done for a long, long time. And of course, now with our amphibious ships and our C-17 aircraft, we're in a better place to provide this support to the region than ever before. And that's becoming all the more important.
Absolutely. Professor, thank you so much for joining us tonight.